Welcome to another edition of the Best Bets episode. We've got a fun weekend of games ahead, and we actually have a better Friday night slate than we've had in weeks past, or at least, we have a marquee game in St. John's and Yukon. So before we talk about our best bets, going to talk about some of the marquee games for the weekend, not necessarily bets that we have, but we're going to talk about maybe which side we would lean on any of these games. The first one being St. John's at Yukon, as I said, that'll be tomorrow night. Yukon favored here by 2.
Yeah, should be a fun game at the top of the Big East. I think UConn's sitting at 8-3 right now. St. John's at 10-1 at the top of the league. Should be a super fun game. It looks like UConn's going to get McNeely back, so he changes a lot for this team on both ends of the floor, especially for shooting, and he's a really good defensive rebounder as well, which is going to go a long way against the St. John's team that creates really most of their offensive value on the offensive glass. They're not going to be able to just blitz UConn on the glass like they did to Marquette, and that's kind of how they won that game on Tuesday night. But I think it's a better spot here for UConn, just with St. John's going on this unbelievable run. But the matchup for me sort of leans to St. John's just because their athleticism can kind of overwhelm the perimeter group of UConn, even with McNeely back. And the St. John's offense doesn't need to live behind the arc, or doesn't live behind the arc really at all. And UConn tries to run shooters off the line. So I think St. John's can have some efficiency in the mid-range in this game. And, Kadari Richmond could keep going on the run he's been on. He's been incredible lately. He's been making a ton of shots in the mid-range. And
you're arch nemesis, right?
He kind of is. Just every time I'm on the opposite side, he always finds a way to get it done. So
man, but
yeah,
how about St. John's defense? I wasn't always a believer. I mean, I knew they'd be good, but I thought that it wasn't going to be good enough to take them over the top. But the way their defense played the other night against Marquette in particular, forcing turnovers and late, there's that one clip I'm sure most people have seen if you have social media of any kind and follow any basketball pages. But man, their closeouts and just getting to spots and forcing Marquette to continue to put it on the deck, but they're right there to sit and help. Really impressive. And I think it's just a testament to what Rick Pitino has built there in just a short time. He's gotten his guys really playing the way that he wants them to play.
Yeah, I mean, this looks like one of his Louisville national championship defenses. It's pretty much on the same level. It's just obviously the offensive end of the floor that's been kind of limited, and
no Peyton really Siva here. No Peyton Siva on this team.
Yeah, or Russ Smith. You don't really have that kind of backcourt. So I think it's a pretty efficient number. I do think St. John's is a better team, and this number implies that they're 1.5 to 2 points better. So ultimately, it's a stay away just because St. John's is probably due for a loss at some point, but I kind of like the matchup for them, just overwhelming UConn on the perimeter.
Yeah. I think, like you said, it's a good spot for UConn. A little bit dicey of a play being on that side because, like you said, I think that St. John's defense can kind of overwhelm UConn's guards, as we saw what Marquette did to them last week. Just forcing them to put it on the deck, but they don't really have the athleticism to get into the paint. And even if they do, St. John's is really good in help. And I don't think they'll need to help all that much because I think they just have better one-on-one defenders. So I'm a little bit weary of that on UConn's side, but their shot making could ultimately win out here at home, and St. John's offense could lay an egg on the road. They're kind of due for one, I think. So like you said, probably a stay away, but should be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, and Hassan Diarra is questionable right now. I don't know how true that really is. I didn't really see him go down in their last game or anything like that. So I would assume he's a go, but if he doesn't play, they don't really have a point guard in the entire rotation without him. So that would only make the turnover issues a bit worse. And they were super fortunate to beat Marquette in that game. They turned ball over 24 times. It was like
Yeah.
38% of their possessions, which is an insane number.
Yeah.
So if that happens, they would have to shoot 12 for 19 just like they did last game, and I just don't see that happening again.
Yeah. Um, Another key game here Saturday, Texas Tech at Arizona. Arizona minus 3.5. I believe that's a projected line, right?
Yeah.
Um, this one's interesting, right? Because Arizona's on a hot streak, so it's hard to bet against them. But uh, Texas Tech beat Houston last weekend, playing good basketball too. So this should be another fun game.
Yeah, both teams are just riding extremely high right now. Like Tech's on a nice win streak right now too. I believe 6 or 7 games themselves. So it'll be definitely an interesting game. Arizona, I would say they've been a bit fortunate to have won, especially the game against Iowa State. Obviously, we talked about the Caleb Love 60-footer that they were in that game the entire time, but to win that game the way they did was not not ideal for Iowa State,
Sometimes you just
especially.
got to be a little bit lucky. Sometimes, right?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes you just need Caleb Love on your team, and magical things can happen. But
Or the other way around too. He can lose
yeah,
you a
oh yeah,
game just as fast.
absolutely. Yeah, he'll win you or he'll lose you a game. We've seen that enough times, but my heart kind of says Texas Tech is going to win this game. I think they're the better team overall. I think their shooting can shoot over the top of this Arizona defense that prefers to pack it in a little bit with their surprising lack of rim protection right now. And Texas Tech has plenty of shooters in Chance McMillan, Elijah Hawkins, Darian Williams, and others that they have so many different shooters on this roster. And in last game, Texas Tech, I believe, won 70-54, and they kind of dominated the glass, which is another area that Arizona typically wins is on the especially on the offensive glass. And Texas Tech kept them off the offensive glass for all 40 minutes. And I think that's more indicative of what can happen in this game as well. So I have a slight lean to Texas Tech just because I do think they're the better team overall. I'd have this closer to +2.5 to +3, but ultimately not enough of an edge to play anything.
Yeah. I don't really have a feel for this game. I think it'll be a fun game. Both teams riding win streaks here. Um, yeah, I don't really know what to think, but look for Caleb Love to either win his team the game or lose it for them. Um, Next game, Florida at Auburn. This line projects at Auburn -10. Big question mark will be whether Walter Clayton Jr. plays or not for Florida. Missed Tuesday's game with an ankle injury against Vanderbilt. So I expect he's questionable here for this one. Not sure if he's going to play. If he does, I still don't really know if it matters. It's kind of a tough spot on the road at Auburn. Auburn playing obviously great basketball right now. I just expect Auburn to probably get this one done just because of the spot. But Florida can surprise us.
Yeah, and they can hang in this game on the glass, which Auburn typically overwhelms teams up front, and they typically overwhelm teams on the wing as well with their athleticism all over the floor. And not having Clayton just kind of makes this Florida team a guard short. Like you saw Elijah Martin handle the ball a little bit more last game, and it was pretty ugly in the first half. I know he had like 25 minutes into the game, he had 5 turnovers, and it was a little bit ugly. But I mean, Aberdeen stepped up and played pretty well, but obviously it's really tough to replace a guy like Walter Clayton, who's not a true point guard, but it's another guard to have back there. They only had really 3 guards that they could go to without him. So, but it is really tough to fade this Auburn team, especially when they're playing at home. They just dominate teams at home. They lost one game last year at home, I believe, and won the year before. But besides that, they've basically dominated everyone they've played. So I think they could have some success in the post. Florida typically won't double down in the post, so I would expect a decent day for Janai Broom here. Like if I'm looking at a player prop, I would actually look at Janai Broom to go over his point total because Florida really does trust their bigs to defend him one on one. And I don't think he'll get the Chinyelu assignment. I think he'll draw more of Condon and Tommy Haug, and maybe they would have to send 2 in that instance. But I think they'd be okay with Broom going for 25, and then they could cut off all of the Auburn shooters. So I think that would be their path to stay in this game as well as getting on the glass at like a 40 to 45% clip, which they could absolutely do. But ultimately, like Auburn goes on a run, it's going to be really hard to come back from.
Yeah, for sure. Then the last game before we get into best bets, Kansas at Kansas State. Uh, Kansas State plus 4.5 here, coming off a big come from behind win at Arizona State, where Arizona State was started the game up like 19-2. And this is on the road for Kansas State, 19-2, and then it was back and forth near the end, and Arizona State missed two free throws that could have won them the game with basically a second left, and ultimately Kansas State won. So they're riding high right now as well. Two straight wins, beat Iowa State last weekend at Iowa State. Here they are at home against Kansas.
Yeah, they've had some good fortune as of late. They've shot the crap out of the ball in the last three. I didn't see the numbers from the Arizona State game, but before that, I believe they're like
Started ugly.
50% from three.
They started like 1 for 11 and then got scorching hot.
Yeah. So, I mean, they've been shooting pretty well over their heads, although they are a solid shooting team with Brendan Hawson and Max Jones on the wings. But this is I would probably lean Kansas State here just because Kansas on the road hasn't really given us great efforts at all this season, especially looking back at that Baylor game. Like, yeah, they dominated the first half, but to lose the second half of that game by 30 points against a team that probably had tired legs in Baylor, they were playing five guys the entire second half, and they still got run out of the gym for 60 points and a half. It was a bit concerning, and they're trying to figure out the rotation and what's going to work best with KJ Adams in the rotation. Like we saw Flory Badunga be really, really good and when Adams was out for those 3 to 4 games, and now he's only playing like 12 to 15 minutes a game, and they've kind of lost some value on the offensive glass because Adams is back in the rotation. Like I'm not going to say Adams is a bad player by any means, but it's just it's not really fitting right now. They have three non-floor spacers on the floor at a time with Harris, Adams, and Dickinson, who really doesn't shoot threes anymore or even take jumpers. He's kind of just sitting on the low block or making passes out of the high post. But they haven't figured out their offense with Adams on the floor and laying 4.5 in a road environment in Manhattan, a place that Kansas State's obviously going to be extremely fired up for this game in a rivalry game. So definitely not going to lay the 4.5 with Kansas. I would look at the side with Kansas State, but I do think they've been running a little bit hot right now. So this line's a little bit short. I think if they weren't shooting 50% from three in their last 3 games, this would probably be 6.5, 6.5. And then I would definitely be inclined to take Kansas State here.
Yeah. A couple things to think about, I think, with Kansas State is they've been playing through Coleman Hawkins primarily, right? And teams have been sending doubles at him. And I don't think this is a matchup where Kansas is going to feel the need to send doubles when he catches in that like mid post area. They had a lot of success against Arizona State in particular when they sent doubles, and David Gasson just kept cutting to the rim. Arizona State's defense very unorganized, not a very good team. So that's probably part of it. But I would suspect that they play him more straight up. Now I think that uh, that Kansas State could have some success with those two, Hawkins and Gasson, on the perimeter, making guys like Badunga and Dickinson step out, because I think that they're a little bit quicker than them, can take them off the bounce maybe. So I think Kansas State is the right side here, but especially after Kansas put the beating down on Iowa State, kind of a letdown spot. Although it is a rivalry game, so they should be up for it, but nonetheless, it is on the road, so should be a fun game anyway and a fun atmosphere.
Yeah, yeah. Not having the double Hawkins like takes away his best trait. Like he's really, really good because he's a really good passing front court player, and it'll
Right.
take away those rotation skip past threes that Hawson and Jones are going to get. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good matchup angle there. To where Adams is like a pretty much a perfect matchup for Hawkins. So turning him into a scorer, I think will close out a lot of things for this Kansas State offense. So yeah,
Yeah. Anyway, moving into our best bets, we've got four of them, and then a few other leans. First one, Marquette coming off 2 straight losses against the top of the league in St. John's and UConn, plus 2.5 on the road at Creighton, who quietly has won 8 in a row. Nobody's really talking about it, but, not a ton of, like, impressive wins, but still, getting the job done on the road at home, even when it may seem like a losing spot.
Yeah, and I mean, they do have 2 road wins in that stretch. They beat UConn on the road when UConn was reeling during that time, but to beat UConn on the road is always a really good win in this league, no matter how good they are really, and then they beat Villanova on the road. I mean, we saw how that game ended with an Ashworth banked 3 from the corner, so I think they were pretty fortunate to have that game, and besides that, they played a pretty soft spot in their schedule right now, and I think this is a pretty good time to sell. I thought last Saturday was a pretty good time to sell against Villanova, and it was tight all the way through, but Villanova probably should have ended up taking that game. Stephen Ashworth with a late turnover, but ended up getting his revenge with that corner 3. So it broke my heart and hurt my wallet a little bit. So uh, yeah, I won't complain about that one anymore. But Marquette coming off 2 straight losses, like you said, against the top of the league. And I like the matchup for Marquette as well. I bet this earlier in the year when Marquette was at home against Creighton. I believe I got hooked there. I think it was 8.5 and ended up Marquette winning by 8. But I think the matchup still holds true here on offense. They can space out Kalkbrenner with their 5-out offense. They have shooting pretty much all over the floor outside of Stevie Mitchell, which that is something to monitor. Is Kalkbrenner was actually guarding Stevie Mitchell and was just electing to have him just shoot threes, and Mitchell ended up 2 for 9 in the game. So definitely something to watch out for there. But if he knocks down a couple, I think he can start to break down this defense, and you probably won't be able to have Kalkbrenner just stand in the paint and allow him to shoot. So I do think the 5-out offense over time throughout this game is going to end up working out. And Marquette's quickness off the bounce should have a big advantage against a slower footed overall Creighton roster outside of like Jemiah Neal. It's a pretty slow footed, more athletic roster. And on the defensive end for Marquette, they should be able to turn over Creighton really often. I mean, Creighton's 254th nationally in turnover rate, and that's in a pretty like conservative defensive league in the Big East. Like there's a lot of teams in this league that play just drop coverage and super conservative style defenses that don't really care to turn teams over. And Marquette's just not that team. They're probably the most pressure heavy team in the entire country, and they're 6th nationally in defensive turnover rate. So they should be able to give Creighton a really tough time. And Creighton also won't be able to expose Marquette on the glass like we saw St. John's do on Tuesday. They're 302nd nationally on the offensive glass. And in the first game, Creighton was only able to win the rebound battle by 3, which if Marquette's only losing it by 3, I think that's a win for them in the long term. And they're going to win the shot volume battle with their turnover differential. So on the road, I think it's a great number at 2.5. I think this should be closer to a pick to Marquette being favored. I think their offense has been a bit rough in conference play, and especially as of late. But we've seen this offense at its best, and Cam Jones is in a little bit of a slump right now, but in a better spot to do it here against a more conservative defense. He's going to feel super comfortable with either. I mean, Jemiah Neal might get the assignment, but against drop coverage, I think Cam Jones can have a really nice day off the dribble threes and just getting to the rim. And he's a super crafty finisher, so I'm not super worried about the matchup with Kalkbrenner at the rim, and he can take him off the bounce. So definitely like the side on Marquette on the road.
Yeah, and especially if Mitch, like you said, if Mitchell hits a couple and they end up having to switch up matchups and Kalkbrenner's back to gold, he tends to pop a little bit more. And so then, you got to pick your poison a little bit. Are you going to live with Ben Gold shooting threes who can get it going, or are you going to let Cam Jones get downhill to the rim? So Creighton's going to have some decisions to make, I think, if they can't guard Kalkbrenner on Stevie Mitchell.
Yeah, that's the Creighton defense's kryptonite. Like you've seen it with Villanova over the years. Like when Eric Dixon plays the 5, it gives Creighton some real problems. Like Dixon has kind of torched Kalkbrenner throughout his career when he plays the 5, and I think this is a pretty similar dynamic with this 5-out offense. So I also will most likely be betting Stevie Mitchell over threes if I get an offer, just because he's going to get some open ones. He only, I think he's only made like 23s on the whole season, so you can probably get over half a three at hopefully plus money, and I will definitely be taking that because the defensive scheme last game for Creighton seemed to work pretty well. So I would assume Kalkbrenner starts off on Mitchell again. They're going to leave him open. Wouldn't be surprised to see him knock down a couple, and I'll gladly take my chance at something on plus money.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on to the next game. Going back to the well here with Indiana. Indiana +4 at home against Michigan.
Yeah. Thankfully, I haven't actually gone to the well yet. Last time against when we threw it out against Wisconsin, it was just a lean. Thankfully, they got down 20 early in that game, but this is a super high emotional spot for Indiana, I think, mostly because of the Woodson news with him potentially stepping down. I don't know if it's official that he's going to be stepping down. I haven't really seen, but from most news outlets that I've seen, it said that it's more likely than not that he's going to be out of there after this year. So I think this is kind of a back against the wall effort for Indiana here, and I definitely expect them to play with the most effort that they played all season. Hopefully, it's not the opposite and they kind of just give up. I really don't see that happening with this roster. I think they kind of owe it to a legend in Mike Woodson to play extremely hard, especially in this game after that news broke out. So just from that angle, I like Indiana to give their best effort. And outside of the last game where they got down 20 super early and they were just kind of out of it after that, I think they've actually played kind of well despite losing 4 in a row at this point. Dating back to their last win, they beat Ohio State on the road in overtime. Then they lost a back and forth battle against Northwestern that it got away from them a little bit late, but they were winning that game for a decent stretch. And then they were down to the wire at home against Maryland a couple weeks ago, and probably should have won that game. It was kind of a miracle shot from Rodney Rice to win that game. And then against Purdue, they put together an extremely good effort where they kind of dominated Purdue on the interior, and Purdue was a bit fortunate to walk away with that win late. So just looking at the actual results, it doesn't look great for Indiana. But outside of the last game, I actually don't think they've been playing all that poorly. And I think this is a decent setup for them. And teams are also shooting 42% from three over the last 4 games. So I think for any team, there's going to be some regression there. They're not a great 3-point defense, but 42% is a bit high for a 4-game stretch. And in games that they kept tight, like that's down to 35, 36%. They probably walk away with a couple of those wins. Like they probably walk away with that win against Maryland, obviously. So, but I'm also interested in fading Michigan on the road. This isn't just me backing Indiana. Like probably wouldn't be the best proposition just to try to back Indiana there. But yeah, definitely I really want to fade Michigan on the road here because outside of their win at UCLA, they haven't been all that good on the road this season. They noticed a couple notable performances. They lost at Minnesota in overtime. Minnesota's trending up, but still probably the bottom of this league. And they got smoked against Purdue. They were never in that game. They turned the ball over probably 100 times like they typically do. And that's not going to play all that well here on the road. And they've regressed overall in conference play on both sides of the ball. And per Torvik, if you filter just conference play only, they've been the 7th best team in this league. I think a lot of people perceive Michigan to be a top 5 team in this league, or even some people think they're top 3. And I don't buy that at all. I think they've played pretty poorly throughout conference play. They've had their last few games, they've been getting by the skin of their teeth. Like against Rutgers, they won by 3 on the road. Rutgers isn't, and that was without Dylan Harper as well. They snuck by Penn State and barely beat Oregon. And Oregon had a nice little comeback there, but Oregon has shown that they haven't been all that great of a team lately. So, and like I said, the turnover margin is a real issue for this Michigan team as well. And they're going to struggle to close out games because of this. We've seen this on multiple occasions, and in a hostile environment, most likely, I think it's going to be even more difficult for them to do. And one final note, I think Indiana can compete on the glass pretty well with Michigan, who has also they've regressed in that area as well. They haven't been able to beat up on inferior competition like they did early in the season. So I think Umar Ballo and Malik Renew will be able to compete. And I think Mike Woodson's too big lineup that he's pretty stubborn to go away from is actually going to play pretty well here against Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden. So, and like I said, this feels like a last stand kind of game for Indiana. If they can't put together a good effort here, I think it's a lot of these players are kind of going to pack it in. So I'm going to back them here in what's a pretty favorable spot. And I would play this to +2.
Yeah, I don't hate it. Rumor has it though, Mike Woodson was already signing his NBA TV contract at the facility today. Um, for the playoffs, actually, he's going to start in the playoffs.
Oh man.
Anyway, next game, Washington Northwestern, Washington +1. Northwestern's really banged up right now, and having to play a bunch of guys that, quite frankly, the other team doesn't even have to guard. You just sit in the paint.
That's all like good news for Washington because they're not the most daunting of defenses out there. And if
As
you're
you
going to
saw
leave,
in
yeah,
Nebraska.
and if you're just going to be able to leave guys open, that's only a leg up for them here. And it's a defense that, so believe it or not, it's actually kind of trending upward with Frank Kepnong back in the rotation. I know last game he only played 6 minutes, but Washington was trying to play small ball and optimize their spacing in that game, which they did in the first half. And then I don't know what happened in the second half. It was pretty ugly, and Nebraska was able to get the job done. I think Nebraska's a pretty underrated team as well. People kind of threw them out the window after they lost 7 straight, but that was all shot variants for Nebraska, and they're trending upward again as we've seen in their last few games. But as for Northwestern, like you said, they're super banged up right now. Brooks Barnheiser done for the season with his foot injury, and Jalen Leach hurt his knee last game. I'm not really sure if he's going to go. I don't think
He
it was
stayed on the
great.
bench. He stayed on the bench in the game, but he didn't come back in.
Yeah, all I saw was he was going to get further testing done on his knee, so it doesn't sound great, but there's nothing official there. And regardless, like without Brooks Barnheiser, the shot making already kind of falls off a cliff with only having Leach as that perimeter creator. Really, obviously they have your guy Nick Martinelli who can carry this team through the post a little bit, but Washington is a pretty good post up defense, and Washington's going to be able to pay more attention to him as well when these other guys on the perimeter aren't able to really create their own shots or even make catch and shoot threes. So I don't anticipate Martinelli being able to carry Northwestern through this game. He might be able to do it as a
But
passer a bit.
man, he's been awesome.
Oh, he's great. He's fantastic. Um, but yeah, and on the defensive end, they're kind of falling off as well, just because of the lack of bodies. Barnheiser's really important on that end, and Jalen Leach as a ball hawk is really important. So if he's missing, I think Washington has a real advantage in this game, and a little bit of a play on Washington with getting Kepnong back in the lineup, but mostly a fade of Northwestern. Torvik has them projected as a dog right now. I don't think it's going to come out as Washington as a dog with the injury stuff, but I would play Washington to -2.
Yeah, rumor has it Chris Collins has Boo Booey at the NCAA offices right now petitioning. Wouldn't be surprised if that were the case.
Getting
They,
his 7th year of eligibility.
they could use him. They could use
They
him.
could.
It'd actually be pretty solid with him. Um, anyway, last game of official best bets: Iowa State -11 against TCU. Reeling a little bit after 3 straight losses, but definitely not time to hit the panic button yet.
No, not really. I mean, I have my concerns about this Iowa State team, but this is absolutely a get right spot for Iowa State. They've lost 3 straight on pretty bad shooting. I don't think they're a great shooting team right now by any means, but they're only shooting 28% from 3 during these 3 losses. And Momcilovic would be really nice to have back in the lineup, but they're not 28% with the current group that they have. And on the defensive end, it's been especially bad. They've allowed 43.3% from 3 in the 3 losses. So, and they are susceptible to a little bit of 3-point variance with their rim denying style of defense, but a 15% difference between their offensive and defensive 3-point percentages a bit drastic. I don't think there's any team in the country that has that sort of 3-point disparity. So they're automatically due for regression in my eyes, and they're typically a great 3-point defense regardless. So, but TCU is not going to be able to burn them from three. They don't really have any shooters on this roster outside of Brendan Wenzel, and they're shooting just 31% overall this year. And TCU is a rim reliant and transition reliant offense, and Iowa State is very good at taking away those actions. They're 17th percentile per synergy and transition opportunities allowed, and 38th percentile in rim rate allowed. So I think this is a great spot for Iowa State to get right at Hilton, and you're going to see an A+ effort, and I think it leads to a blowout. I'm not super concerned about the number unless it's like ballooned to like 16, but it's currently sitting at 11 on Torvik. I would play this to 14 and a half. Once you get to these double digit numbers, that it's a little bit harder for it to land close to that number. Like if you're in the single digits, obviously you want to be a little bit more picky, but in like these get right blowout spots, I'm not going to be super picky about the number unless it's super inflated.
Yeah, no. I mean, they should be rocking and ready to go. They haven't played since Monday, so they've had all week to prep. I'm sure that Otzelberger has them ready to go. Little extra shooting on the gun, getting right. Big win coming for them on Saturday.
Yeah. Let's get to Marion Watson a couple extra shots with the gun. Hopefully, maybe he can knock one down.
Yeah,
they just leave him open. Like you can just stand in the paint, and he's a non-threat. It's a pretty significant drop off from Momcilovic.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, we have a few other leans. Texas at Vanderbilt +2, Texas A&M +4.5 at Missouri, and Mississippi State +2 at Georgia.
Yeah, these ones might end up making the card. I kind of like the matchup for Texas against a Vandy defense that has been kind of reeling. They've been kind of getting smoked on the interior, which I didn't completely see coming, but their front court is pretty small, and against SEC opponents, it's a little bit tougher to get away with playing as small as they do, and they create most of their defensive value, especially in league play, by turning teams over. Texas is one of the best teams in the country at taking care of the ball. So, and I expect Texas to get it going with their shot making a little bit. They haven't made any shots really recently. In their last like 3 or 4 games, they're shooting, I believe, like high 20s, low 30s from three. And Trey Johnson had a pretty bad game last game against Arkansas. I expect those shot makers and Pope and Johnson to get right here, although it being in a road environment. And I do think their ball security is going to be able to get the job done.
Yeah. Texas definitely, like, especially at home in the last one, really struggled in the first half, ended up coming around a little bit in the second half, but it was just too little, too late. I don't hate the spot for them, but I just honestly, being a Texas fan, I just never know what to think. I never know whether they're going to show up one day. Like last Saturday, I thought they were going to lay an egg at LSU and won by 30. So I just don't know what to expect.
Yeah, they're just pretty reliant on whether shots are going in or not. They don't really move the needle in many other areas, even on the defensive end too. Like they don't rebound particularly well, and they don't get after teams in the turnover department like Rodney Terry teams have typically done, just because I think the roster is a bit more offensive centric. So yeah, definitely a little bit scary backing a shot making team on the road, but I think just fading the Vandy defense that's really regressed in league play, I think is probably the way to go.
Yeah. Then the next one, as I said, Texas A&M +4.5 at Missouri. Missouri coming off that close loss at Tennessee. Got Texas A&M at home here.
Yeah, I mean, this is all dependent on if the number actually comes out at 4.5. I think this would be a little bit inflated, and you can still sell Missouri off of that loss. They've been really good in league play, but I still think A&M is the better basketball team here, and I don't think it's great schematically for A&M. I think Missouri has a lot of good guards, and they're really good in the spot up game. And A&M, they're willing to give up a ton of threes, and they'll take away the rim. And Missouri wants to play in a track meet as well, and A&M will oblige to a track meet. They don't really care about taking Missouri out of transition, which probably benefits Missouri. But this is all number, all selling high on Missouri, and A&M should be able to get all over the glass like they do against everyone. If Missouri's, especially if they're playing zone in this game, like Dennis Gates will play any type of defense. Like I couldn't tell you the type of defense that he's going to play coming into this game. He could do anything. He'd play 1-3-1 to start the game, and like it wouldn't really. He could box in one Wade Taylor at this point, and it wouldn't surprise me. He'll play any type of defense. He'll put anybody on the floor as well. So I just think at some point his deep rotation is gonna bite him, and it could be here, but I'd be willing to play the number at 4.5 if it comes out there. I'm not sure we're gonna get that though.
Yeah. And the last one, Mississippi State +2 at Georgia. Georgia coming off a big win by 19 over LSU.
Yeah, this is a buy low on Mississippi State, basically all the way. I mean, they've been getting smoked from three on the defensive end, and even on the offensive end, they're not shooting it well. Their last two losses, I think teams have shot 50% from three. It was Alabama and then Missouri. Missouri lit them up last Saturday, beat them by like 25 in Mississippi State's gym. So they should come out hungry here, getting a whole week off against a Georgia team that is completely reliant on getting to the rim and getting on the glass. Mississippi State denies the rim, and they will force teams to beat them from three. And as we know, Georgia's not the type of team to do that. They don't really have a ton of shooting, and the Bulldogs should be able to turn. Oh, they're both Bulldogs, but Mississippi State should be able to turn over Georgia at a pretty high clip. And I think some of these other shooters in Claudel Harris, Riley Kugel, Melendez are due to start hitting more shots than they've been making. And I think the dribble creation of Hubbard and Harris will have some success against this Georgia defense that doesn't like to help off and give up spot up opportunities. So, but it is mostly just a number play on Mississippi State. This will most likely end up being a play, just because I'd be kicking myself if I didn't buy this to, buy low on Mississippi State. Like early in the year, beginning a conference play, this would be sitting at Mississippi State would probably be favored at this point. And I'm not completely out on this team, although their defense is reeling right now. I would say this is a pretty good matchup for their defense.
Yeah. I'm not super high on Georgia either. Never really was, and they've been reeling a little bit themselves. So, anyway, that does it for all our picks. Make sure you're in the Discord because that's where the official card will go. Also, probably will be on the Action account if you're following that. So keep up with that stuff and any changes we might be making. But other than that, enjoy the games. Should be another fun weekend of games as always. Good luck on your bets, and hopefully we can all make some cash. Talk to you next time.